Hello and welcome into Football.Fun with Laird. I am Andrew Laird, joined today once again by Adam from Football.Fun to answer all your questions that we've probably answered already, but apparently not succinctly enough. Adam, welcome back.
Thank you, lads. Great to be back. It's becoming a weekly or at least every 2 weeks event. And yeah, it's a lot of fun being here. So thanks for having me on again.
Well, that's the whole point, right? It's all about fun. I came to you because I had a few people asking me questions that basically revolved around like, how the hell is this all going to work once we go to the pro version? And as I was trying to explain it, I was like, man, there's someone significantly more qualified to do this. And if we can do it on a stream, then other people can go back and look at it, and it would just be a lot easier. And so obviously I reached out to you and pretty much was that, how the hell is this all going to work? And it's one of those where it's like, yeah, it's fairly simple. And then I started to explain it and I was like, it's starting to feel not that simple. But
yeah, you're absolutely right. But there are two ways to explain it. One is you have a squad, they play in real life. If they do well, you win packs, you open the packs, you see what you get, and you just loop that over, right? That is one way of explaining it. The other way takes about, you could write a book. Like it's hard. It is hard. Like if you want to understand like all the details of how everything happens, it is really complex. So yeah, happy to be guided by you about like how much detail we want to go into today.
So it came about because there are a few people who maybe played in the beta for a little bit, and obviously we've spoken on a number of previous streams, kind of how the pro version is both similar and different to what we have played already. But I think one of the big things is people hear like, oh, they're gonna start with packs. How do I buy the packs? Who can buy the packs? Where can we get them? And then it's like, okay, once I have my packs, what happens then? I've had a few questions about kind of total supply and kind of how much control you guys have over it in terms of, if things start going well, do they just like flood the market with supply and we all kind of are left with less than we thought we did? And we kind of touched on that, on how the supply works previously, but I think now that we're going into the pro game, it's going to, more people are kind of just like trying to check all the boxes of their, should I join this platform because I feel like I've done this before. And so I thought it would be really helpful to get through this. So let's at least start with how we're all going to start, because as we've discussed, not everyone is going to be able to come in and buy just like unlimited packs to get you guys going. But there are ways for people who haven't played to be eligible for some packs. And so for this first pack sale, like if you could just kind of walk us through how that's going to work.
Yeah, sure. All great questions. And the short version before we go into the long version is we've really spent a lot of time thinking about like, how do you get a stable market? And a lot of that is due to how you seed it at the start, and ideally making sure that the supply goes into the hands of real fans, because real fans are the guys who will stick around and they'll play longer. They aren't just there to get an airdrop and then sell it, which is like a plague in Web3 gaming. So we've really tried to like cultivate the right sort of community who are generally quite crypto native and aware of how markets work, and also generally have a history of playing sports games. So they can show us this in a few ways. So one is some of them been playing Football.Fun since February. So we've obviously got some account data there from people who are dedicated. We've never particularly promised any specific thing, but obviously people who help will get something in the future. And part of that is kind of enhanced buy limits during the pack sale and the market, what we call the pre-market phase. If you haven't been playing, that doesn't mean you won't get that. So tomorrow we're launching a feature. It's called Connect, really. And you can show that screenshot if you wanted.
Yeah.
I shared earlier at this point. It might be useful. But basically, this allows you to like link social media profiles and wallets, and we can look at basically some history about that person then. So all those collections there, there's football games in there, things like Footium, Club, Meta Soccer. So things that exist, or even projects that have died previously. I thought it was quite cool to like give people who bought those projects, even if they like went under, well, actually, if they still hold the item, they can now connect it and they get some value out of it now, because that we know that, hey, these guys aren't just someone who's turned up for an airdrop. These guys have been playing football games for a while. Or for example, you can connect a So Rare account, and then we will look up that account, and we'll be able to see that these people have been playing for years. And then what they get is essentially like a reputation score with us. And this will increase the amount of the initial pack sale that you can purchase. And when we launch the market, which will be early August, we're not just putting that out there and kind of hoping for the best, because what will happen is one whale will come along and just he'll just put 200K into Yamal and become the Yamal Baron. And you just don't want that. Like, that will mess up your whole economy. So we have buy limits in that period where you'll only be able to buy a certain amount of a player per day, so that everyone gets a kind of fair chance to acquire their favorite squad. And that pre-market phase will probably last most of August. And then we'll just kind of gradually lift, like those buy limits will increase. And by then, supply will be nicely, evenly spread, and biased towards the guys we know are actually sticking around to play. That's the idea.
Providing utility for NFTs that are long gone. How about that?
I really like
they all been waiting for.
I've been rugged many times in various things, and it counts for something now. Like, at least it proves you were there, and it proves that you've been trying and experimenting with these different games for a while. So it tells us something about that person. So why not use it?
No, I think it's a great idea, particularly for those who, like you said, they may not have been able to be active in the first kind of couple phases of Football.Fun, and but still may be people who you want on the platform early, because they are, as they'll prove here, kind of
we
comfortable
have
early adopters.
We've got there was, I think, just under 4,000 accounts created since February. And by the end of the Club World Cup, around half were still playing, which I think is really, really strong. Mm-hmm. So that makes about 2,000 monthly active users. But we haven't even launched yet. It's still super, super early. So yeah, we absolutely do want kind of all the kind of football crowd, but also reaching out to a lot of the wider crowd, like people who like trading in crypto. So we've included a lot of the kind of more generalized NFT collections. So like people with CryptoPunks and Pudgy Penguins and Moonbirds, who are having a bit of a revival at the moment. So it's trying to as well get into different audiences, as well as just the football crowd, because we're also found that a lot of people who don't like football like this game, which might be quite counterintuitive, but they like trading. And this is all good people who bring liquidity, and then they get into the football as a result. So we've been able to convert a few football fans from crypto natives as well, which is really nice.
I mean, it's pretty similar to the situation. Like, I guess those people the people I'm thinking of are probably football fans anyway, but there are plenty of people, as we've seen, like on So Rare, who are like, oh yeah, I really like the Prem. And then within a couple weeks, months, they're like K-League fanatics. And it's, the ability for a game to expand your interests just adds to the excitement of being on that platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Even my wife absolutely has never shown any interest whatsoever in football. She now knows pretty much most of the players across the top 5 leagues in Europe. And she has her own little names for them. Like Dembles is her name for Dembele. But yeah, it's kind of cool to watch that.
So the introductory kind of period of like this pre-market, how long is that? Does that last?
That will probably last about 20, 30 days. But I think for most people who are not spending thousands a day, you'll kind of forget about it relatively quickly. Like if you're just playing with like a more sensible amount of money, if you're spending, I don't know, hundreds of dollars, this will just kind of go away like quite quickly. The buy limit is really there to stop the whale like just smashing 100K into Yamal on day 3, because it just skews our market. They can do that all they want in August, in like the end of August, because by then the supply will have distributed a bit more widely. But yeah, they're not too restrictive. You know, we do want people to come in and spend money, so you can spend on you can spend across the whole 100 players. It's just that the limit applies to a specific player.
Okay,
So
that was my next question.
a whale could come in and spend 100,000, but they'd have to do it over a spread of different thing. And we do have people who want to spend that kind of money because it's crypto, but the vast majority of people don't. I don't spend that amount of money. Most people in crypto are in like low hundreds or thousands. And if that's the case, you're probably not going to notice the buy limits.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, it's not even a new project situation. If any project, you don't want people to come in and say, I want to spend $100,000. And you're like, sorry, that's just too much for us right now.
Yeah, it seems a bit counterintuitive. But yeah, in this, when your goal is not to immediately just make money, it is actually to seed a solid market, because we think that is the best setup for longer term success. Then yeah, having a buy limit in crypto. Some people, when I told them about that, some of our investors and whatnot, they were like, you're crazy. Like, why would you have a buy limit? I can't. They were like, that's either, I can't decide if that's genius or crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm like, me neither. But I think having a buy limit but no sell limit, it also shows like the confidence we have in the platform, and that we've put that in the hands of the right people. I will say that the people who will notice the buy limits are bots. People we think are bots, or farmers who have a history of like basically dumping tokens or like farming airdrops and then just immediately selling everything. Like we look at all that like quite religiously. So we will literally be manually reviewing every single account that uses the connect feature, and going through wallets. And if someone is like, you know, not really a football fan, or they're there for just for the airdrop, their buy limits are going to be very, very low, like maybe $10 per player per day. And yeah, or if you're a new player and you have no connect and we don't know anything about that user, then early on they will have lower buy limits, but they can always just connect an account, and then we'll do like quite a rapid review of that. So yeah, and this is temporary as well. Like it's only for the first month or two.
A quick question here from the chat. Do we know what pack prices will actually be?
Yeah, they are $20. And you get 2,000 shares of split between 4 players. And there's going to be 100 players that you could possibly get. And they're all pretty much good, in my opinion. So we've curated the 100 best in our, well, not even our opinion really, based on like trade volume of the game to date and which ones are most popular. So in a way, the users have selected who's in those 100, but they tend to be the ones people want. We made a few changes based on like injury and whatnot and transfers. But yeah, it's kind of then in a kind of, you get this like reveal experience, which is a little bit like a Spotify recap. So we've built this to be quite cool and shareable, and we want it to just be a fun experience. Like, oh, people love opening packs. This will be the only time we're ever going to do a pack sale like this, is once now, and then probably another one later to add another 100 players to the platform at a later date. Other than that, we're probably never going to do a paid pack sale in this manner again. The packs in game will be the rewards. So this is, you asked about how supply is issued. It's through winning. And so whenever you win in pro, you win what are called tournament points. And then if you beat other people in the league rankings, you get skill points. And by spending those currencies, you get new players in packs. And this is the mechanism by which new supply is brought into the market. So in answer to the original question, there is no day when Football.Fun just decide to sell 30% of supply. The supply comes out as people win. So the kind of lever we have to manage the economy is basically the number of tournament points and skill points that we issue for winning. And we're gonna be working that out. Like there's actually no way of just saying, right, this is the correct number, because it's going to depend on how the platform develops. So we're going to be doing that literally on a per tournament basis with a kind of North Star objective of we want this to be rewarding, we want it to be sustainable, and I think to an extent avoiding that predict and provide model, which I think has failed in a lot of other products. So, the one where it's like the annual announcement of this is the size of the reward pool and this is the rules and this is how it's going to be. And it inevitably changes, for it either goes up or down. And these are just distracting kind of either terrible news moments or they're moments of euphoria. In Football.Fun, it's just going to change on a per tournament basis, right? And that is something we just want people to get used to. The reassuring thing and the different thing is that it doesn't actually cost us money to change the reward pool because we don't take the money in the first place, right? And this is an important difference. So the way most games work, or even things like DraftKings, is they take in money, and then that becomes company funds, and then they decide how much to give back. We skip that part, and when people spend on the marketplace, 95% goes into the smart contract, which this smart contract is the market, right? And that is where, when you sell your player, that's where the money comes from. We never touch that money, so we're like a completely non-custodial platform. So therefore, we never decide how much is in the reward pool. That just depends on how much money people spend and how much people sell. That liquidity pool is also the reward pool, because if ultimately your goal is to cash out and sell, you do that to this decentralized marketplace thing. And Adam can't do anything with that. Even if I wanted to, I can't just take the money out of that marketplace. It doesn't belong to the company. It effectively belongs to the community, and it's managed by this smart contract that we have very limited access to. We can fix bugs, but we can't just take the money out of it. And that's this is kind of why I would probably not build this platform without blockchain, which is really, really interesting, because a lot of platforms, I think, particularly a couple of years ago, people were jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, there's VC money available to do blockchain things, so let's just make things with blockchain for no reason. I don't think I would actually build Football.Fun without blockchain, which is actually quite important. And we've talked about people being burned previously on things like Football Index. We'll name them. That's a UK platform. I lost a lot of money on Football Index as well. And one of the problems, and I was very into Football Index, I wrote a lot about it, but I still didn't understand it because I didn't have any information. Whereas a great thing about blockchain is, how much money is in that liquidity pool. You can just look it up. And then no one has to ask me. It just is there, and it is what it is. And I think that's a really good thing about using blockchain tech for this sort of platform.
Yeah, I think the whole key to the to the supply question is just what you covered, that increased supply comes from people winning in the game. And that I think the biggest concern, the supply concern for every new user is just what happens when you guys arbitrarily, as it always seems, decide to sell a whole bunch of stuff because you want to make more money. And that ultimately makes my thing less valuable. And
Correct.
from what it sounds like, you guys don't even have the ability to do that.
No. We could issue more supply. So we could increase the tournament points and the skill points, which would allow all the community to open more stuff. But we wouldn't directly make money from that unless it stimulated more trading.
Right.
So there is that. But ultimately, like, we don't really care who wins in the tournaments. Like, we don't have to pay out a certain amount of money if one particular player wins or another. The only real goal of us setting TP and SP, skill points and tournament points, is the North Star being, we need this to be rewarding or people won't play, and then they won't trade, and then we won't make any money. But we also need it to be sustainable. Otherwise, then no one will trade and we won't make any money. So it's our job there is just to kind of balance the amount of tournament points and skill points, and make sure it feels good. We'll probably start quite conservative. It's always easier to add more than it is to take things away, optically.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, we need to sort of dial in what the correct number is over time.
Yeah, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Do you have are the reward packs, or the packs that you can get from tournament rewards, the same type as these pre-market ones?
No, they're different. So the pre-sale ones are called founders packs, and they have 4 players, and they're not quite random. So you get, if you imagine the 100 players, they are stack ranked by like their previous history. So the top, I think it's the top 20%. No, the top 25% are in like bracket 1. And this is like the Doués and the Yamals and the Mbappés. And you always get one of those in your pack. And you get 2 from the middle, and you get 1 from, I will say, the bottom, but they are still amongst the top 100 players in the world. They're still solid. So yeah, and that just creates a little bit more fairness in this opening phase. The packs that you get in the game as rewards are completely random. So there's that doesn't mean like, engineering random. That's like random. And you just get whoever is in the player pool, like the available players. It just rolls a dice, and you just get 4 of them, and you get a varying number of shares in that player as well. So you can, the variance can be quite high when you pull the pack. So you can either get a lot of shares of Yamal, or you can get fewer. And there are 3 flavors of pack as well: the Pro, the Epic, and the Legendary. So if you win more points in the tournaments, you can open bigger packs and just release more shares of the players as well.
And so it's possible to kind of accumulate the in-game, like the SP and TP, in order to get the better packs, like if you essentially get better packs later on.
That's right. So in Pro, and this is different from the free-to-play version, you win tournament points, and this is what lets you open the pack, but they go into what is called the development squad. And when they're in the development squad, you can either choose to promote them using your skill points, and this is what makes them tradable and really allows them to participate in tournaments for you. If they're in the development squad, they don't, but they are basically reserved for you. They are in your wallet, but you can choose to either promote them, or if you don't want to, you can cut them, and that basically recycles them back into tournament points, and then they go back into the player pool for someone else to pull in a pack, basically.
Are the packs tradable?
No. No, they are not. And the tournament points and skill points aren't either. We probably need some way for you to exchange them, because at some point people are going to get like too many tournament points but not enough skill points, and that's going to be annoying because you'll have loads of packs open but not actually be able to promote them, or the other way around. So we're thinking of a way of like allowing you to trade your tournament points for skill points in some way. But we have to be slightly clever, because the skill points thing is like, if you want to do a mass market game that's available in as many jurisdictions as possible, you want to be a skill-based game, not a game of chance. So the skill points, apart from the fact that I think it's fun to have to beat other players, and we have this like really, we'll talk about this another day maybe, but we have this kind of skill-based like ELO esports style ranking system. But yeah, I like that in general, but it also means that we are very, very strongly skill-based. And therefore we can never give away skill points. Like, you have to earn them, otherwise it undermines the whole thing. But we could, for example, allow you to burn some tournament points, which would give you like a bonus pot of skill points that you earn on top of any you earn, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So like, if you earned 100 and you had 50 in your bonus pool, we could maybe give you some of them. So we're trying to work on like a clever system. Otherwise, we'll never quite balance it right. We'll have to let but if each user can decide what they want to do, that's probably the easiest way to get it feeling good.
I want to touch on the players a little bit, meaning the footballers, because there were a couple questions in the chat, and I actually had a few as well. Palmer added just before this, just logged back into the game for the first time in a while, and the new layout looks cool. It's a very fun looking website. But he said, one thing I did wonder when I was playing before, why is there such a limit on players across teams, and why are those the ones that are in the game? Which James then added 100 growing to 200 players, top 5 leagues have around 100 teams. So is that going to mean 1 to 2 players per team? And I'm going to add on top of this, because in the Discord, you guys asked for basically like, who do you think should be in the top 100? And I submitted a list. And as I'm going through, I was just like, man, and as you described before, the worst, like in the top 100, when you're like, you're going to get somebody from the bottom, but like somebody from the bottom of the list of the top 100 players in the world is like, it's still somebody who's very good. But one of the things so firstly, let's go into kind of how the top 100 are done, because I don't think you're choosing to do it as 2 players per team. Obviously, there are some teams that are much better than others, and so we don't want to be stuck with having to do only 2 players from PSG, and then also having to have 2 players from, Getafe or something. I don't even know if they're still in La Liga. But if we could at least go into how the top 100 is chosen, and then basically what happens when we get to going from 100 to 200.
Gotcha. Yeah, great thread. So yeah, when I'm going down like the draft 100 list, you're just like, I want all of these guys. Like, they're just good, which is great. So overall, the decision to have a fewer number of players is based on 3 things. One, the more players that are in the game, the harder it is to win. And people like to win. Like, the more you win, the better it feels, the more people stick around in the game. So if you did the other extreme and had like 5,000 players and maybe 20 winning slots per category, we would have to split the rewards so thinly that a win wouldn't really feel like a win. And it's pretty proven psychology that people like rarer, bigger wins than they like lots of small wins. They like the big moments. So it's optimized around that. And I think through testing, we've worked out somewhere between 200 to 300 players tends to feel quite good. Beyond that, people start to get quite frustrated that they don't win enough. And it is focused, definitely biased towards like the kind of Europa League, Champions League teams in each league. So often a team might have 7 or 8 players in if you're Real Madrid. And we will not have team like representatives from like the lower ranked clubs unless they're like a particular star that people like Anthony Celta Vigo, for example, was interesting to people. So he was on the platform and he was also really good. So that's why we do that. But there's also a lot of people who love the scouting, like finding the random players that no one else knows about and backing them early. So we have an almost separate but related game mode coming for that, where the objective of scouting is to pick the players who are gonna make it to that top 200, 300 players. So if you've got a kid at Ajax that you think is going to move to Real Madrid, you might scout him early. And then if he moves to the platform, and he's like the most popular scouted player effectively, then he will go into like a weekly runoff with the other players in his category. So like say the four most popular scouted midfielders of that week, and only one of them will make it onto the platform. Then if you were right and your player makes it, you get that player at the entry price. So you get like first dibs on the player because you were the first to pick them. So I think there's a sort of avenue there for the more for the guys who like to sort of find those early access players. But there was always this issue in a lot of games because people always favor youth instinctively because they want the players that last longer and they're maybe a bit more exciting, but they don't tend to peak actually as performers until they're like 25, 28 often. I think Yamal is obviously the exception, as is Doué. But here now you can still scout players who are kind of before, they're not playing week in, week out yet, but they're still relevant on the scouting because people believe in them. But the main platform is free and clear for like the big players that everyone recognizes. So the final point being, a lot of people if you speak to like FPL players about a game with 5 leagues, they're quite intimidated by it because they feel like, oh no, I'm not going to know that random Bundesliga player who is like intense, but they do know Harry Kane and Kimmich and the players they see in the Euros and the World Cup. So it then becomes much more accessible to a lot more people because it is using predominantly players that people recognize.
And so when we go from, actually, I don't even want to talk about 1 to 200 quite yet, but is the number that 100, or when you get to 200, do you want to keep that as stable as possible? And the reason I ask is I'm thinking of, something happens in January and fill in your top 100 player signs for Al Nassr, and now they're not in one of the top 5 leagues. What the player base obviously changes because now we have one fewer player, possibly more, who knows? How does that get addressed basically in the game?
I mean, that is part of the game, right? Like predicting if that might happen. If a player does leave, or let's say their career ends for some reason, we don't do anything about that. So we don't hold people's hands in that way. The market is, again, not owned by us, so we can't really do anything about that. It just stays open. So if people think a player is going to retire, they can just sell into the liquidity that is there. And because of the way the math works, there is never a point where you can't get a price for your player. It might not be a price you like, because if you're like last out, but you always get something. There's never a situation where you're sort of stuck with players you just can't get rid of. You can always get something back. And then they basically get flagged as retired in the game. They are hidden, but if you check show retired players, you can see them, and their liquidity pool persists. So let's say they go to Al Nassr, but then 2 years later they come back. We could re-enable them, and people could just start trading them again. So they're not like gone forever necessarily.
Okay. We talked about this before. I remember the number 1 million, but I'm not sure if that is exact. But what's the max number of shares per player?
It's now 25 million, which makes no real difference actually from there being 1, except it stops the prices getting to like really silly levels. So like it would just create UI issues if players were like, and also like perception issues if a player was like $1,000.
Yeah.
With more shares, the shares are cheaper, but you have more of them. So yeah, we can't. Well, I'm probably not allowed to speculate on what the prices will be. The lawyers will tell me off, but they should be smaller numbers as a result of
Right.
having more shares available.
Well, I mean, you previously mentioned, excuse me, about the ability to buy fractionalized shares, but even the perception of something that is, if you're like, oh, I want to buy whatever player, and if their per share price is, like you said, $1,000, and you're like, oh, I can buy a fractionalized share. It's not always just a great feeling when you're like 7 decimal points in, and you're just like, oh, that's how many shares I own. Great.
Indeed, yeah, it does feel like it feels more substantial. If you've got 1,000 shares of a player, that feels like something that means something. Whereas if you've got 0.03 of Yamal, I don't know how good that would feel.
So, sticking on this supply thing, since we know it's now 25 million per player, but I think even when it was at 1 million, you kind of said something like, I don't see how we realistically get to that point. Like, we're not going to get to a point where we run out of shares, or that saying that, though, there is a path, I guess, to essentially issuing every share of a player at 25 million. It seems much farther away than 1 million. But if I understand this correctly, basically the way that we get there is shares are issued in this pre-market in the founders packs, and then tournament rewards, and that's it.
So people would have to open enough packs to like completely deplete that that supply in the player pool. And obviously the world changes. So like we get new players coming into the player pool, some leave. Every season, there'll probably be some, I don't know, there might be like 20, 30 changes to the 200, 300 players per season. Maybe that's even conservative. So yeah, new players do keep cycling through that market. It is technically possible. Like we have simulated all of this. It is technically possible to run out of a player, but it's extremely unlikely. The reason being, one, you could always buy them off the market. And if the player is like, if that were true, their price would be so high that people would have sold. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Like if that were to happen, the price would be so high that anyone rational would sell, and then the players would go back into the liquidity pool, like the smart contract. We do have the ability, which is not enabled, but we might, to like purchase some back if we felt like that was a good thing to like get Yamal back into the reward pool. But yeah, we're not. We'll wait and see. It's years away before we would get to that point, I think.
And effectively, that's really the only. Like, I'm trying to think of, because if you ran out of shares, let's say, then the only way to acquire them is from other people, and so, yeah, effectively, like you said, like you won't get any from reward packs anymore, but the ability to get them from others is still available.
Yeah, I mean, you'd actually get them from the smart contract. So this third party kind of decentralized thing that exists in the internet. But yeah, and from the user perspective, you'd just be buying shares someone else had sold.
Right. But if nobody's selling, then you can't buy.
Correct. Yeah. Well, unless there's some sitting in the smart contract, but yeah.
Right.
It would just cause, like any kind of token or market, it would just mean the price was higher. There'd never be a point where you just couldn't buy. It would just mean you were probably paying way too much. So you just wouldn't, but you could, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the kind of player universe can change. You said, I think the number you said before was around 30, like season to season. So what happens to players that are removed from the pool, basically? Like the shares still exist, but does that mean we now have a bigger player base, and therefore it's essentially harder to finish in the top 5 for each position?
No, so we will. I think the cap of player, I probably wouldn't want to go above 250 players because I think it just gets harder to win. So at some point, it will kind of be like a one in, one out sort of system where, let's say, you get a midfielder retires, then the scouters will decide which player goes on to replace him effectively. So and this is kind of a theme of Football.Fun, like we try and step back and do as little as possible and let the platform users decide who should go on the platform, because then there's demand, like rather than it just being like, oh, Adam likes X player, so he's going to put him on. What Adam thinks is irrelevant. Like it's the players, it's the users themselves that scout the players. If anyone can come up with a better term for people who play Football.Fun that isn't users and isn't confusing with players who are the football players, then please let me know, because I'm yet to crack that one.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's really jarring.
Yeah.
They sound like drug addict users. Anyway, yeah. So it's the users who decide like who joins the platform. It's also them that decide who kind of tacitly leaves the platform because they sell them. And when they get to a certain level where loads of people have sold and there's no trading action on them anymore, then they just get automatically flagged by the game and said, right, this player is being retired. They are low volume. No one cares about them anymore. And they go into that retired category. So you can still, let's say you wake up a year later and you've been absent from the game, and one of your players retired, you will still be able to sell into whatever liquidity is left. It won't be much, but you can. And then because they've then opened up a spot in the game, the scouters will then replace that player with someone people do want to trade.
Right. So you guys aren't actively choosing every year, let's remove these 5 guys.
No, it's entirely based on what like user preference, effectively.
Right. But of course, they also effectively remove themselves if they transfer to a non-top 5 league.
Correct. Unless people decided they still wanted to keep them for whatever ceremonial reasons, which, it wouldn't happen. I think people are there predominantly. There's no, I mean, maybe some people feel there is, but there's no sort of inherent collectability in our platform yet. Maybe one day, but people generally tend to be there to win the game.
Yeah.
So if they don't have utility anymore, I would expect them to get sold.
Yeah. Okay. There was, let's see here. I do like this line, Ricky. If you got 100,000 Yamal at 10 cents, you'd be brain dead not to sell him if he hypothetically reached 100. So yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree. I'm probably not allowed to have opinions on these things anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think who knows what prices they will get to. But yeah, people will just kind of make their own decisions. And sometimes like selling for some people just tends to make a lot of sense. You know, maybe their grandma needs their rent paying or something. You can't really judge anyone for individual decisions, you know.
Have you guys kind of tried to project out what you think the shares will cost in whatever amount of time, or is it just so based on the game that it's almost impossible to do it?
It really depends on just effectively how much money users spend. So the starting price of the player will be consistent across all players. So it always has to be 0.0125 cents per share, even in future. So like this is the price that the first 100 will launch at. And any player that joins through scouting in future will also have to join at that price. We won't like jack it up later because the game's more popular or whatever. One, it would be just a kind of shitty thing to do. Two, it would mess with the math. It would mean that prices moved at different rates. So everyone has to start at that level. And I do know what they can feasibly get to based on spend, but I'm probably not allowed to say because, again, I have been very strongly told by our lawyers that I'm not supposed to speculate on prices, but people will discover that themselves. And I think that's the fun part. So I think August will be a lot of fun. We are putting like a sort of health warning on the site at that time because new markets are always tend to be quite volatile. So I think it really should be somewhere, I think, for people who are used to trading and used to crypto in that early phase. And we'll probably put a suitable warning on the site. There will be a free-to-play version as well for people who are not into that. So if crypto turns you off or you just don't want anything to do with that, just play the free-to-play. And we're going to make that even more fun as well next year. And there's a few tweaks we want to make to the free-to-play before I think it becomes like really, really compelling. We're focused on the pro version now. But yeah, once we get to next year, I think the free-to-play is going to mirror very, very closely the pro version of the game. But yeah, I think August could be potentially quite volatile, as any new market is. So yeah, we're going to have like health warnings on that, and also be encouraging people who are not into crypto or trading just to play the free to play instead, for sure.
Quick question about the packs, which I'm not sure you have this figured out already, but James said, I joined in April for the end of season Champions League and Club World Cup. What would the number of packs likely be that I can purchase at the beginning?
It depends. So we're going to go through a very long and tedious process, but worth it, where everyone who uses like the Connect system, we will literally get a spreadsheet of the users, how long they played, how many trades they made, how many packs they opened, where they finished in the league, how big their squad value was. So obviously, the better you did, that's going to be a good thing for your like reputation. And then we look at your connections. So like we can look at your social profile and be like, hey, is this a real person or is this a bot? We can look at, I guess there's the Discord that is connected. So we can look if you've been active in Discord, but we don't really pay attention to like, we're not asking people to sit on Discord all day chatting if they don't want to. Like, just don't do that. It's not relevant. And also like your So Rare account is linked or your club account is linked, or we can't do MFL, unfortunately, because MFL is on Flow, which is like an obscure-ish chain. And it would have just taken a lot to add it. But any kind of evidence we've got, we will literally go through each person manually and just assign them like a rating, basically. But yeah, there's not really anything to do. You've already kind of done it or you haven't, you know. And we will be very fair. And I think anyone watching this show is going to come out quite well because you are obviously a fan, you know, of sports games in general.
Is there it's understandable if it's a number that you don't want to share, but is there a max number of packs that you're selling in this pre-market drop?
Yes. So it is quite limited. So the 0.0125 share price, the effective price in the pack sale is a 20% discount on that. So we don't want to give away too many shares because it's 10% of the total supply of your MAL like goes in that pack sale.
Okay.
So it's quite a lot, and then you've got 90% to open through gameplay and tournament rewards. It's quite well balanced. But yeah, we're keeping the buy limits for the pack sale quite low. It will be in I'd probably say low hundreds of dollars for the vast majority of people. People who are whales, I think the cap will be around $2,000 spend, because you just need to give them quite a lot to keep them happy because they're used to playing with like lots of money. But for the vast majority, I think it's just going to be a couple of $100. And it's not a revenue event for us, really. It's actually more of an event to seed the market with our best fans. The bulk of our revenue has come from investors and backers, because you need a couple of $1 million to seed a market like this. It's not sensible or wise to try and get that from your casual users who don't even know the platform that well yet, you know. But people who are interested might spend $50 or $20 or $100. But yeah, it's not an event that we're depending on for revenue. It's more to help seed the market and give early access players a sort of nice hit of the supply early on.
And given that it seems like you're individually reviewing each account that is going to go through the process of figuring out how many packs they can buy, that there's almost no I don't know if there's no ability, but it seems like there's not much of a benefit to like multi-accounting, or like you said, you try to get the bots away because it's not easily tradable user to user. Basically, it's not like I can open another account, double the number of packs I get, and just like send them to my first one.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, obviously people will try that, but it's quite difficult to do. So we had a lot of people like abusing our referral scheme like early on, and we like our devs made these whole trees of like linking, like here's patient 0, and he did 5 accounts, and then he did 10 accounts, and so yeah, we know who did that, and we've got that on record. But yeah, it is hard. So you would have to have like multiple social accounts and multiple things, and even then you would then end up with 5 accounts forever, and it would just be really annoying for you. So we can't prevent it entirely, but we have made it really annoying to do, which is a good thing, because we want people to play for real and enjoy it, and not have 10 accounts, because it becomes a job at that point, I think.
Yeah, I guess the just way I'm looking at it is that there's very little user to user interface or interaction, excuse me, that anytime there is interaction between two users, and it's just easy to multi-account and try to game the system that way. But since everything kind of revolves around it's between the user and the market through the smart contract, it's
user to smart contract primarily.
Right.
I mean, it depends on the type of game. So like I've told you recently, I'm enjoying MFL at the moment. I got hooked at the weekend. And there, I think the kind of negotiations with players, actually with other managers, adds something to the game. Like I like it. I've done a couple of trades with people in Discord, and because it's a slower paced game, it suits that kind of negotiation mechanic. I don't think Football.Fun would, because it kind of reacts as fast as real life. Like you just want to be able to sell. I don't want to negotiate with someone. I just want to do my thing. So yeah, it's different, and it does by nature like remove a lot of the exploits. We will still get like pump and dump groups and like trading groups who try and pump a player to whatever price and like sucker people in, and then they sell on them. So again, this is why like the beta phase, or like the pre-market phase, is there so that not everyone has enormous amounts of supply, and it's quite distributed, which makes it harder for those groups to like collude. And also the early users will probably be quite savvy to it and not quite easily get taken in. So if you see players like just rising way higher than anyone else for no reason whatsoever, most people look at that and go, I see what's going on here, and will tend not to follow that in, hopefully. But yeah, there's always things like that out there, and we can't always stop everything, but we try and encourage people to play fairly. And there's also a difference, like we have teams in the game which I think are really cool, but could, in some ways, like what's the difference between like a team and a pump and dump group? It's quite, because if everyone's chatting in there and going, oh, I really like your Marling, he's great, and everyone buys him, well, cool. But that's a little bit different from like in an organized way arranging to buy the player and then dump at a certain time. Like that would be considered to us like bad behavior. But a group who just decided they were the Harry Maguire fan club, and they wanted to just buy as much Maguire as possible, that's probably quite a good game for me. Then there's nothing wrong with that. So, there's no hard rules against this sort of thing, but we will be looking at certain behaviors like that and thinking, is that a good thing that we want? And we do have things like the buy limits, and So they can be enabled if like if accounts are screwing around and like creating a bad experience for everyone, we could enable like buy limits on those accounts, for example, again, to like to kind of deter that kind of behavior. But overall, it's crypto. It's a decentralized trading platform. Our bias is going to be to do nothing as much as possible and just let people trade, unless there's like really, really offensive things going on.
The so it's interesting that you said that, because you kind of have the ability to address those sort of things at the user level, but not at the market level. So it's not like you're going to go in and say trading on Yamal has stopped because of this suspicious behavior. Like, do you guys have that ability, or is the smart contract keep that from you?
We could disable the buy button in the app if we really, really wanted to, or felt like we had to. But yeah, like that would be a very, very extreme situation. Yeah, like there's going to be like a progressive decentralization of the platform, really. So like right now, we control that buy and sell interface. So even though the smart contract exists, in theory, we could disable trading on a particular player if we wanted to. But the longer term vision is actually you turn that off one day, and you in theory, people could make their own interface to the trading platform and build like a third party interface to Football.Fun, which would allow people to trade with that same smart contract. So that's what we want to do eventually. But initially, during this kind of like beta period, like we have that ability to sort of turn the buying off if we wanted
to. James is asking, what defines a whale? Can I not help seed with $5,000 I have ready?
In my book, that would be quite large.
Feels whaley to me.
I also, it's crypto really makes you like completely insensitive sometimes to like the value of money, because I also have met whales who want to put in mid-high six figures to the platform. And again, like in the seeding of the market, like you do want to limit that, because it's just kind of too much, and it gives that one person too much influence. But no, like 5,000 is going to be too much for the pack sale. But with a good connect score, it might be like 1 to 2,000. And then you would also get whitelisted for like higher buy limits in the early pre-market phase. So when the market opens, accounts in good standing would have higher limits than the bot accounts, for example.
Right. I was looking at my list of questions, and I think we got through what I was hoping to get through. For like users who join, let's say in October, because we're doing this July 23rd right now. So like the pre-market founders packs haven't even been distributed yet. But for those who want to join later, it's just as simple as sign up and you just buy shares from the marketplace?
Yeah, I think by then there'll be no, we don't plan on doing another founders pack sale ever again. It's a good initial distribution mechanism because it's very random. But beyond that, the distribution is through winning tournaments and winning packs. So yeah, a new user will just come in, they will buy off market, and that will be their route in, and they'll just buy whoever they like or whoever they think is best value at the time.
So it's buy those player shares, which allow you to compete in the fantasy game and then win in the game to get reward packs.
Yeah, I mean that's the essence of it. It's try and win the tournaments. Like pick again, like when we said at the start, like it's either really simple to explain or it's really, if you can have the really complicated version. Like the whole skill system is really complicated, but if all you do is buy players that play well in real life, you will do well in the skill system. It really isn't that hard. So I'm in two minds about how much information we actually give out. So if you look at other games like League of Legends or something, or Counter-Strike, they don't actually tell people what makes up their skill rating exactly. It just kind of works. And as long as it makes sense, people stop questioning it. They just say, oh, this is the skill rating. So maybe we can get to that sort of point, or maybe people do eventually want to see like every detail. We haven't quite worked it out yet, but it is quite intuitive. Like, when you've had a good week. If your squad has 20 players and 10 of them do well, you will get a high skill rating, and you'll probably understand vaguely why. And that might be preferable to telling everyone every detail, because the problem is, even like enthusiasts like me will say, oh no, I want to know every detail. But do you though? Like, because then once it's out there, everyone feels like they have to understand it. Whereas if no one really understands it and it just is a thing, then it takes that mental burden away from everybody. So yeah, we're going to try and work out like what the best amount of information is there to share with people.
It's funny because I feel like those are the people who then try to like optimize the wrong part of the game. And so they're using their own resources of like, oh, how do I get this higher when really we need to get this higher?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the game is most fun if I'm just thinking, who is the best player on this football pitch, right? And I want them. It's less fun if I'm trying to game a skill ELO system and saying, oh, I think I think I will get extra points if I've got players that do a lot of passing or whatever. Like, that's not fun. It's the game's job to make sure that the scoring system reflects real life. And if we do that correctly, then I think it will just be more fun because you won't have to worry about it. As long as people like respect it and they look at their score at the end of the tournament and go, yeah, that looks pretty accurate. That kind of accords with what how I thought I'd done. Then it's generally going to be all right, I think.
I was equating this actually to the scoring system, and I wanted to pull this up. So this was basically Cole Palmer in the Club World Cup final, and just looking at each individual stat. And so we get points for successful dribbles, negative points for offsides, recoveries, crosses, and it's like all of this is really just the data that feeds the final score. And it's like, did Cole Palmer have a good game? And the way that these kind of like complex scoring systems work, yes, you can go in and figure out who wins the most tackles, who has the most ball recoveries, whatever it is. But ultimately, and I think you've said this kind of on every show, like, you want the fantasy game to show the 5 best players, like who performed the best this weekend. And it's not just who had the most goals or whatnot. And so I feel like it goes into that you don't need to like nerd out on the details always. It's just, we have the top 100 players in the world. Who were the 5 at each position that played the best this weekend? And if, maybe the one that you thought was best was 7th. All right, it happens. But,
I think people generally accept that. Like, as long as their player scores highly, they don't get upset if someone else did slightly better.
Right.
And the skill system helps there, because now if your player finishes 7th, you still get something from that. So he doesn't finish in the top 5 for like the tournament point rewards, but he still counts for your skill rating if he finished 7th. So it's not like it's a complete disaster if he finishes 5th or 6th now, where it was previously. 7th is still going to be something to celebrate, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've been saying to a number of people is just how I think the game will be played very differently in, once the game launches for real, as opposed to like the Club World Cup and even the up into the Champions League, because we didn't have it. There was no skill rating that we needed to work on. And so
also people
were just dumping shares.
When there's no like longevity to the game, like when they know it's an end, there's a hard end point, people behave extremely differently than they will in a kind of forever game.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to this, because that's the ultimate vision of the game. It is a kind of more longer term thing. Obviously, a lot of people will sell and trade every day, every game. But I think the majority of people will get their favorites and kind of hold them for a period of time. And then your top 10% of hardcore traders will trade around that kind of core stability. And both of those different types of users are good for each other, right? The core guys give kind of more stability to the market. The hardcore traders like try and chop their edge off by being extremely active, and they provide a lot of liquidity usually. So yeah, it is a game you can kind of play however you want. I don't tend to have a lot of time, so I will probably be more in the buy my favorite players and trade 3 or 4 times a week, something like that. I know guys who, even on free to play, we look at the logs of people's behavior and it's just incredible. Like on a free to play game, and they can be making 30, 40 trades a day. Like they just love it. So yeah, that behavior will continue, but I think it will be like a, 5-10% of the population will be like really, really hardcore traders.
The top 5 thing I wanted to touch on, and I completely forgot about it until just now, so apologies for waiting so long. The top 100 players, we were saying you don't have a specific number per team. Are you going to keep the number of players per position the same? Because if it's top 5, then it's very different. If it's, if there are 6 goalies in the top 100, 5 of them are going to win each game, each tournament. And so, what is your mechanism for that?
They'll be roughly equal, give or take 1 or 2, perhaps. The keepers are the slightly different one, so there are obviously fewer of them. And then the sort of odds of winning are kind of balanced. So they are only the top 3 keepers win, whereas it's the top 5 outfield players that win. So yeah, roughly they're calculated to have the same odds of winning. But yeah, there are obviously fewer of them. But for forwards, mids, and defenders, it's the top 5 who win the tournament points. But obviously now with the skill system, they all count if they do well,
right?
As well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really liked about Football.Fun, and this feels offensive to some, so I apologize, but I just can't stand goalkeepers. And like goalkeepers in fantasy games are just, I think they're the worst part of it. And the fact that I could go through, and if I was willing to sacrifice tournament points from goalkeepers to just not have any of them. So anytime I got an impact, it was like an immediate sale because I don't want them.
Fair enough.
And so but one of the questions that somebody brought up to me was like, essentially what happens when when it's time to kind of not reallocate who the players are, but if we need to add players, if we had, 3 forwards and 2 midfielders who retire and we added 5 defenders, that obviously skews the number of players that can theoretically qualify for the top 5 each tournament. So is the goal to continue to maintain a stable number per position?
Yes. So the way the scouting would work is a kind of contest to get a player onto the platform would trigger if a slot became available. So like if a defender retired, that slot opens up, and then that week you will get a runoff between the top 4 most scouted defenders. And basically the one that gets the most volume, like the one people buy the most of, they join the platform effectively. If you buy a player that doesn't make it, you just get refunded in the mechanism. So it's a kind of put your money, like there's no other way to like determine people's confidence in something. And things like Polymarket demonstrate this. Like it's the whole theory behind people have opinions and then they have things they're willing to put money behind, and the things they're putting money behind are always more true. That's why Polymarket has done so well. So it's a similar kind of model, and that is what decides who joins the platform. But it's going to be like 1 in, 1 out, and maintaining the roughly fair ratio. It does get out of sync by like 1 or 2 players from time to time.
Do you guys have kind of a projection of how many new players you'll need each season, or like what the turnover will be? Footballers. I'm sorry, I'm like
Football,
stuck on
yeah,
this
right.
player user
I don't like
thingy.
calling them footballers. Yeah, no. I can guess. I would imagine 20 to 40 turnover, roughly, out of 250 would seem to make sense to me. But we haven't adequately been able to simulate that. It depends on a lot of things, like, players just dip in form like all the time. Like they players that seemed to be like the next big thing don't always make it. So like Jadon Sancho, for example, like at Dortmund, people thought he was going to be the big thing. He moved to Man United, and then you would have had like real high expectations, and then people would have sold him when he flopped. So you get that is kind of the best thing about fantasy sports to me, in that real life is unpredictable enough. So that's why we try and be quite minimal in what we do. Like, we don't want to throw in crazy things that happen all the time, or like rule changes every season. The real world of sport is predictable enough, and people understand, like, if the player gets like sold because they underperformed, they get it. Like, oh, all right, that's part of the game. If a player becomes sold because the platform changed the rules, they don't like it. It's not part of the that's not why they're there. They're not playing a prediction market on seeing what Adam will do to the game every season. They're playing on what is going to happen in the real world of sport. So we're going to try and make that the deciding thing.
So that Sancho example, I guess that's what I was trying to get to before. Like, what has to happen for Sancho to be replaced in the game?
Right. So it's all based on like trade volume. So let's say loads of people sell Sancho and he drops to like close to the starting price of like 0.0125. We'll leave him on that for a bit, because there'll be people there who want to sell or whatever. And they get a little flag on them, which is like the retirement flag, like pending retirement. And if they still, I think it's 2-3 weeks. It's going to be a while before this happens. So, but yeah, it is coded like it's 2 or 3 weeks that they get this flag on them for. And in that period, if they regain interest, the flag can come off. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, and they stay like quite low volume, no one's really trading them, then they get sort of retired. And that's when they get hidden. And you can re-enable them with a check if you really want to see them. But that would be the point where a slot became available on the platform, and then a scouting competition would replace them.
Right. And I don't think you said it before, but do you have an estimated time frame of when we go above 100 players?
It'll be pretty soon. I think towards end of August, early September, we will.
Oh, okay. That is much sooner.
You another 100. It will feel more of a complete game. I think early on that it's certainly going to be true that with 100 players, there's going to be players that are missing. Like, there's going to be players who score hat tricks that just aren't on the platform.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but it's only a month. And we're trying to set it up for like long-term success. So we're just taking that hit. The plus side is it will also be easier to win. Right? There's only going to be 100 players on the platform. And the reward system isn't changing for that period. And people like to win. So it is swings and roundabouts. I thought about putting the other 100 on as like basically like house robot players who could win even though no one owned them, but that felt a bit mean. So we're probably not going to do that. But yeah, I think in short order, we will do another 100, maybe through the pack sale mechanism again, if that works well and it's popular. Or maybe we'll find a different method. But yeah, I think getting to 200 players is something we want to do quite quickly. So it feels more relevant to what's going on in the world.
I would imagine any customer service person would beg you not to put the robot players in for all of the inquiries of like, the buy button is not showing up on this player. Please fix it.
Yeah. There's lots of reasons not to do it. I thought it might be quite funny, but no. The sensible answer, I think, is not to do that and just let people have a good month in August, and it will be easier to win, and then we'll add more players in short order.
It's a nice reminder that there's no universal humor in those things. So, Jeff said, if you hold Sancho shares, he gets disabled, but you still hold. We have those if he ever gets re-enabled. My understanding is yes, you will.
Yeah. So if let's say he went to Saudi for a few years and then came back and you still held them, yeah, you would still hold them. You could also sell them at any time. So even if a player is flagged as retired and hidden, the liquidity is still there, and you can just sell them into the platform.
All right, last two questions from the chat. One is there a minimum number of players in a squad, or can I have one player share? I wasn't sure if that was one player share or just shares of one player. So let's answer both.
Both questions are interesting. There has not been a minimum number of players, so people could just put all of their money into one player before people started calling it full porting, which is kind of brave. The skill system allows you to use one if you want, but it encourages you to use at least four. It's just a little bit more skillful. I think the problem with the full porting strategy, like everything in one player, is it can be luck based. One of the incidentally, like one of the requirements for a skill based game rather than a game of chance is that you have to have some sort of squad. You can't just be based on one player. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you get a penalty to your skill rating if you don't have at least four players. And the maximum is 11, but it's not. So you can have as many players as you want, but only your top 11 players count in your skill rating. The reason we did this was it means you don't have to optimize your entire squad every tournament. Like if you've got a player that isn't playing, he's not going to impact your skill rating because he's not in your top 11. Or if you've got a player that you hold for like long-term scouting reasons, you think he's going to move to Real Madrid next year and he performs poorly, he doesn't chew up your skill rating. Mm-hmm. Unless he happens to do well, in which case he will count for you positively. But yeah, I wanted to like make a squad system that was also really lightweight and didn't have too many rules, doesn't have a deadline, and you actually don't need to worry about optimizing it too much. As long as you have between 4 to 11 players that do well, you should get a good skill rating out of it.
And that's like the top 11. Do you set those, or is it just the top 11 of your shares?
It is the top 11 performers, so like the highest scorers that you have most weight behind. So on the one share question, so you could game this by like saying, or you could try by saying, right, I'm just going to buy one share of every player and get the maximum skill rating. But that doesn't work because it would detect that you have basically scattergunned and not really made any choices. So having one share of player won't count. You'll get a score, but it won't be a good one. If you have one player and you've got maybe like 30% of your resources in that player, then he's going to count. He's going to be weighted very heavily because it's about conviction. I've picked Harry Maguire. I think he's going to perform really well. I've got 30% of my resources behind Harry Maguire. Therefore, the system will recognize that I've made a conscious choice and I will get a higher rating because I've got more behind him. So it is the highest scorers that you have the most resources behind.
So you didn't say this earlier, but now I'm really starting to worry. Am I going to have to buy goalkeeper shares?
No.
The question was, do you need players across every position for the skill rating?
The skill rating doesn't care what position your players are. So you could have 11 goalkeepers if you wanted to maximize your nightmare. Or you could have 11 forwards and the game doesn't care. It's probably better to have a spread, but yeah, it does not force particular. I wanted it to be as lightweight as possible, and not force like particular rules on you.
I feel bad about the goalkeeper slander only slightly.
It's really hard to make. I try my best to make them as interesting as you can, but there aren't many stats that you can use to make them particularly fun. Saves, like we changed the saves to be like you get more for close range saves than like saves that are further away. You could get into like rating the save points based on like expected goals and things, but it does get quite contentious. So yeah, they're just keepers are what they are. You're not wrong. They're not totally exciting, but some people do like them. They tend to be quite reliable performers often.
The only like the fantasy goalkeeper stat that I've never seen anyone do, and I think it's mostly because Opta don't provide it, but they obviously have like saves in the box and
Yeah.
all of those. What they don't have, I'm fairly certain, is big chances saved.
Yeah, they don't.
And I think part of that is because, well, whatever the reason is, I think a lot of big chances missed are actually just missed. They're not saved.
Yeah.
But big chances saved was always one I thought they should have.
Yeah, that's true. I know because I looked it up because I tried to add it and it was not there. But there's no magic to a lot of this. So Opta stats and also like most stats, like other ones like Sports Radar.
Yep.
It's just a guy counting them. So there's no reason why like he couldn't say that is a big chance saved, and add that to the list. Yeah, it's something I'll look into. We're looking at getting like multiple data providers as well. So like you've got different stats, and maybe could do something interesting there. So if there is a platform that counts big chances saved, then we could, in theory, add it. We're not necessarily bound to just using Opta. We could use multiple sources as long as they're kind of respected. People are generally pretty happy with it.
Yeah, the longer I've worked in fantasy sports and particularly football, you going down the stat provider rabbit holes, you realize how genuinely barbaric it is how they accumulate all of this. And there's all this wonderful technology that gets spread around that AI can do it and stuff like this. But ultimately it's just someone watching a game filling in a spreadsheet, basically.
There's a lot of magic in that. I like it.
Last question, which I think we kind of covered, but we'll get into it because James is here and asked, basically, why are you capping it at 200 to 250 as opposed to 400 to 500?
Yeah, I mean, it really is like maintaining frequency of winning. Like people like to win, and also like the simplicity of keeping it to household names. I'm not against like if we get a year down the road and people are like we'd love 100 more players on the platform. We're tired of winning, Adam. We want to win. We want to win less. Then sure, like it's something we could do, but you also don't necessarily want that to happen because it also disperses liquidity in the market amongst like a wider group. So if you look at something like I don't know, NFT card game like Ultimate Champions or So Rare, you have often like 10, 20,000, 30,000 players, and people don't know where to look, or they don't necessarily like people are spreading their liquidity around like very, very widely, and it can lead to a weaker market. So concentrating in the players people actually want, I think, is the better call. But yeah, we can keep that under review. If people want to win less in future, then they can.
I think it's not even just winning less, but it's also there's just a lot more work if you have to be kind of aware of 500 players than 200. And not to say everybody needs to be an expert in every player, but for anyone that has played So Rare, you realize just how many players are out there, and there are a lot that you mostly just don't want to care about.
Correct. And it's not just like you could just say to people, oh, well, just don't play with them then, or don't worry about them. But the fact that they exist eats in the back of people's heads, and they're like, well, I feel like someone else out there is getting an advantage that I don't have because I can't be bothered to look up, I don't know, some guy in the 17th position in the Bundesliga. So it does have an impact on like everyone in the game. Whereas when you look at the Football.Fun leaderboard at the end of a tournament, it's Mbappe, it's Cole Palmer, it's Play, like it's all players people recognize and kind of make people feel good. And I think there's a simplicity in that sometimes. I'm also aware, because I'm one of them, like enthusiasts do like to kind of spread their wings and deal with like obscure players, but that is why scouting exists. And I think all of the scouting enthusiasts will find that that's a really great platform for them to kind of demonstrate their knowledge. But day to day, 90% of users probably won't deal with scouting. It will be kind of a niche thing, which a lot of people may even find for them is their main game. Like they may find the scouting to be the best thing about the platform. 90% of people will probably just stick to the top stars, and that's cool. That's fine.
I'm anxious to see how that plays out, because I feel like there's a lot in the games that we played so far that it's easy to see how it'll work in the pro version, but the scouting part really hasn't been a big part of it or a part of it at all for the user. So I'm excited to see where that
we haven't introduced it. Interestingly, it's one of the first things we built on chain. So it's been built since March, but we just it hasn't been relevant enough yet. It becomes much more relevant in October sort of time. So we'll probably launch it around then.
Last question, I promise, because I've kept you here quite a while here.
All good.
Any plans to reward the FDF kit in the background?
Yes. Shall I show it off? Shall I grab it?
Yeah.
So this thing here is going to change. This is the prototype. So we're getting that slightly redone and made smaller. But this is like it's a blockchain pattern. So like best of Web3 and all that. It's a nice Football.Fun logo, a number 10 because it's just the best number on a shirt. I don't know if that's true. And it has also this nice little tag, which I thought was a nice touch. So we had that designed by the same guy who does all of the like club kits in the game. Mm-hmm. Really, really great designer called Kits by Samu. He's had all kinds of kits. He's done like Italian kits, which have been featured in like Calcio and different stuff. He's really good. So yeah, we've had 300 of those made. And we are going to send them to basically like early access players, people who have the highest volume trading in August, and give them out for various things like winning tournaments as well. But yeah, I think they're really cool. And it's sort of the things money can't buy are often the coolest prizes. And we want to give rewards that are kind of not always about the cash out. It's a skill-based game. You can win cool stuff. You can have great experiences. There's also a marketplace there that exists, and people can sell into it if they want. But ultimately, we're building a skill-based fun product. That's the kind of core of what we're doing.
Long day getting all of those sent out.
Poor Ricks. Yeah, I ain't doing it. I'll tell you that.
Just on that, will you have a goalkeeper version of the shirt, or just outfielders? Okay, no. Just checking.
Maybe in future. If I don't know, if you want one, I could think about it.
It's the only goalkeeper thing I would ever want on FD. Anyway, Adam, I think that certainly answered all of my questions, and I think a bunch of the ones that came in, or all of the ones that came in. So I really appreciate you taking all this time, because I know how busy you guys are getting all this launched. There's actually a funny thing that you said earlier where you were like, we don't want to do any of the work. We want the users to do it. And I think it was part of the scouting one. And it's like, I don't think people appreciate how much work has to get done in order for other people to do that work. And so just like, again, huge congrats to everybody there. Certainly all the devs as well, just who kind of get ignored a lot in these things, because we see the faces sometimes, and then there's plenty of people in the background who do certainly for every place I've worked, they do all the work, and I just get to talk about it. So.
I don't think people, until you've like done it, people don't understand like the amount of work that goes into something like this. And my dev team they have literally never missed a deadline. Like we've been running nearly a year now, not once. It's really quite remarkable people. And yeah, they do, some of them do work pretty much all day, but they also love it. Like there's really good atmosphere in the company as well. It's probably most fun I've ever had at work. So yeah, you sort of think, shit, it's a lot of work, but you also remember times in your career where you weren't enjoying what you were doing, or you were thinking, or you weren't the guy who was deciding what happened and you wanted to be, or you didn't think your job really mattered. And I always just think, well, I'm really, really glad I'm in this situation now as opposed to that. So yeah, you can't complain, even though it is tough, because we chose to do it, and it's you know, a lot of fun as well. And I think really just getting started as well. Really excited about August.
Yeah, no, I think all of us are really looking forward to it, and we say August as if it feels very far away, but
10 days.
Yeah, yep,
it's fine.
It'll be great. It'll be great. So yeah, thank you, Adam. Thank you to everybody for coming. If you could please like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and yeah, there'll be a lot more Football.Fun content coming soon. So pay attention for that. And yeah, Adam, thanks again. Make sure you get outside.
Thanks.